In a previous video, I dove into the topic of white lives matter and the irony that exists within that phrase. And since then, Kanye West has been on a tirade, taking the internet by storm and getting kicked off of multiple social media platforms. But there was another character in the picture, literally, one whom I've openly despised for quite a few years now. None other than Coondace Owens. Now, she is the only figure whose content I will admittedly hate watch, knowing that it'll get under my skin. I even follow her on a couple social media platforms, mainly for the benefit of knowing what the other side is saying as to not exist in the echo chamber. But because I follow her, I saw that she was conveniently promoting a Black Lives Matter expose documentary meant to expose the Black Lives Matter organization's involvement in scandal, including misappropriating funds, etc. So in a similar fashion, I'd like to propose a question. Who is Candace Owens? And when I started writing for this particular video, my plan was to do a deep dive on Candace Owens' life, starting with her upbringing. But as I did my research, I realized that she ain't worth all that. To sum her up, she's a college dropout who referred to herself as having a political career without legitimate accolades to back it up. She used to be an anti-Donald Trump liberal and has transformed into a grifter who seizes every opportunity to lace up her tap shoes and dance for the corporate media. She's the blackface that racists use as a reference point, enabling them to say, I didn't say it, she did. She's an Oreo opportunist who feeds on controversy and insensitivity toward the plight of Black Americans. So it doesn't matter how she was raised or what education or lack thereof she has. What, at least to me, does matter is the fruit that the tree of Candace Owens bears. One of the things that bothers me the most about her is her pattern of deflection when it comes to topical discussion. Her sly tactic is to, when asked about police brutality, bring up abortion, claiming that police brutality against unarmed Black people only makes up 0.00004%. As if 2020 just didn't happen.
I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again, and it's the exact same thing I said earlier. I refuse to take a Black person seriously that wants to talk to me about the 0.00004% of Black people, unarmed Black people that are shot by police officers, and does not want to have a conversation with me about the 17 million Black babies that were aborted. No. What you guys are boycotting, you're focused on things that are not negatively. More Black people were got struck by lightning in 2016 than shot by police. More police officers were shot by Black people than the other way around. So what it comes down to is this is a lot of motion and there's no fact. That's what it comes down to. There's no fact.
She likes to speak in statistics, which on the surface gives her arguments validity and makes them hard to refute unless you have numbers and percentages in real time to rebut her claims. This can make it seem as if she's schooling the experts on the facts when those same facts are just things that either are just not true or conveniently ignore context in exchange for making her side of an argument that much more believable. But many times organizations have fact-checked her numbers and claims and found them to be inaccurate or just outright false.
I just joined the NRA. I happen to fall into the window of people that knows my history. I'm a Black American, and I know that the NRA was started as a civil rights organization, training Black Americans to arm themselves and defend themselves against the KKK. So it's incredulous to me that they stand on that platform. I've never heard that before. That's so interesting. It is.
Well, you never heard it before because it's not true. On the NRA website, it literally says that the group was formed because Union veterans were, quote, dismayed by the lack of marksmanship by their troops. Now, one figure she refuses to acknowledge in lieu of abortion talk is the disproportionate statistics that show that Black Americans are estimated to be 3.5 times more likely to experience fatal police violence than white Americans. But she'd much rather talk about how Black lives don't matter to Black people, aka Black on Black crime.
I would have been perfectly comfortable if people said Derek Chauvin was guilty of manslaughter. I'm comfortable with that charge. I'm not comfortable with the lies that have been told repeatedly about who this man was. If you care about Black lives, if you're watching us thinking, Candace, I just care about Black lives, then why can't we discuss Black criminality at the same time? Because usually on the other end of Black criminality is a Black victim.
One of the longest running rebuttals to the gripes of Black Americans as it pertains to disproportionate police brutality is, what about Black on Black crime? Or when an unarmed Black person is gunned down, suddenly we're hearing about that person's criminal history. This is a textbook deflection that effectively shifts the blame from police training and community relations right back onto the victim. When logically homicide demographics have to do in large with proximity, i.e. Black people tend to live around Black people, white people tend to live around white people. So in turn, if a person is killed, it's highly likely for that person to be the same ethnicity as the perpetrator. It's important to know what this particular type of deflection does. Let her tell it, she's just adding context to the story. But I'd argue this. If when you first hear about a person dying with a police officer's knee on their neck for upward of 9 minutes, your first thought is to look up that person's criminal history, You are the problem. Because what undoubtedly happens is you provide reasons for people not to feel as strongly about an atrocity, adding insult to not only injury, but death. She uses the same tactic that a lot of corporate media is guilty of using someone's checkered past as a talking point in light of their death, regardless of whether or not their death had anything to do with that past. And let's not forget to mention that poverty and crime tend to go hand in hand, with studies including this one from OkJusticeReform.org backing that up. So when you add the complete context of history, including the introduction of crack cocaine into the black community in the 80s, real estate redlining, denial of proper education opportunities, discriminatory lending practices, etc., you have a recipe for poverty and therefore a recipe for crime. Finally, Black Lives Matter. Now, I have no intention on defending the Black Lives Matter organization, only the statement itself. Now, as I've mentioned before, they've been involved in scandals that unfortunately have stripped them of any kind of credibility toward the movement they started back in 2013 when George Zimmerman was acquitted of murdering Trayvon Martin. But the ever so despicable Coondace Owens uses this opportunity to conflate the organization with things like the riots that happened after the murder of George Floyd. Or better yet, she'll once again jump to her favorite topic, abortion. I think it's very important that we not lose track of the fact that Black Lives Matter was always a response, and a necessary one at that, regardless of whether or not an organization bearing the same name is subject to corruption. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. That is, unless the baby's name is Candace Owens. Comments?